Hi, and welcome to Creating a Life You Love with Adriana, where we talk about all things mental, physical, spiritual, emotional health, and how to create a healthy lifestyle centered on the Lord. And lately, I've been talking a lot about relationships. Specifically, the past 3 episodes, my husband and I have unpacked our entire story of how we went from breaking up to getting married. So, if you are interested in checking that out, go a few episodes back. But in theme with kind of relationships, I wanted to talk about something that is very important, whether you are single, whether you're dating someone, whether you're engaged, whether you're married. Wherever you are in life, this is like this is one of the key things that I feel like we're kind of missing in our society now, and that is community. And if you've been following along for a little bit, you know that I have mentioned this organization called Practicing the Way, where essentially they're teaching you how to be a disciple of Jesus. And how we do this is by being with Jesus, becoming like him, and then doing as he did. And so if you think about the New Testament where Jesus calls, his disciples to him, and there's this sense of like they are with him pretty much every waking moment, seeing what he's doing. And then when he leaves them and sends the Holy Spirit into them, they replicate what he does essentially. And so we have that same power because we have the Holy Spirit now in us. But the thing is, our society praises individualism, right? And the issue with that is in order to be like Jesus, we need community, we need people. And so that's what I'm going to talk about today. Practicing the Way has a whole series on all these different spiritual practices on how to grow in the Lord, one of them being community. And so if you want to follow along with me, I'm going to be kind of adding commentary to each of their practices and essentially each of their videos. So, how it works is they have a practice like community, which is what we're going to be doing, and they have 4 videos under community. Each of those 4 videos will go into something different, and then you'll have like a workbook that you'll kind of follow along that you can print online or use an online copy. And you'll, yeah, follow along, right? And do the practices that they're saying. They have like an actionable tool or actionable things that you can do each week. And so that's what I'm going to talk about here. But I'm going to be sharing my experience. And if you want someone to kind of provide commentary, maybe you want to walk through the Practicing the Way videos yourself, you want to go through each one and then you want to listen to my video, see what I have to say, that would be great. If you're not yet ready to, start this course, and you don't have to invest in it because it's free. So if you're not ready to start the course though, and, watch the 4 videos, fill out like the worksheets each week and do the homework, that's okay too. You can just listen to my videos. So with that being said, let's get into community. If you listen to my story with Christopher and I, you know that kind of the reason why we broke up is because we didn't have community. So when him and I first started dating, I had some friends, but I wasn't very open and vulnerable with them. And they only met Christopher like once when I started dating him. We didn't really spend a lot of time in community. And this is really all we knew at the time. Not criticizing myself, it's all I knew. But I didn't think that I needed friends that were speaking into my life. I didn't think I needed people that were telling me like, "You know what, Adriana, you kind of got into this relationship quickly." Or, "You know what, Adriana, did you cut off ties with your last relationship and process that before jumping into this one?" I didn't really have anyone saying that. And maybe I did a few times and I would lie and I would be like, "Oh yeah, like I'm past that. I'm good. Like I totally didn't see my ex, all the things." That's not good. And so I wasn't being open, I wasn't being honest. And if those conversations did come up of like a friend calling me out for something I wasn't doing probably the wisest. And then the other part of it was we weren't having those open and honest conversations at all. So I was the only person that kind of saw me as closely as possible was kind of Christopher because we were intimately getting to know each other mentally, emotionally, spiritually. And Christopher saw a lot of things that were probably unwise in my life. Whenever he would bring it up, I would get very defensive because I didn't understand this concept of like calling each other out for things that are unwise. And maybe this is something completely new to you too. I'm going to go into that and explain it. But my whole point in saying this is eventually Christopher and I ended up breaking up. And a big part of that was I didn't want to have older women speaking into my life. I didn't want a mentor. I didn't want anyone to be open and honest to because Christopher had brought this up before and I thought I was perfectly fine and I didn't need that, right? I just thought I was good. I had God and that was enough. And so when he told that to me and I wasn't open to it, that was not something he wanted to hear. So eventually our relationship ended and this really pushed me to seek community and to seek a church because I mean the amount of loneliness you feel when you go through a breakup is just another level, you know. It doesn't matter if it was even just a few months, like you feel lonely. And so I really pressed into community. I got a part of like a Bible study women's group and I started going to that consistently. And honestly, it really, really changed my life. I started being open and honest to my closest friends that I hadn't been, that I would kind of like maybe not tell the whole truth to. And that's when it really changed for me. I stopped feeling so lonely. And this is something to really think about because I was so lonely in that breakup, but because I had community, I wasn't. And I'm not saying just because you go to a Bible study group, just because you go to church means you won't be lonely. We'll get into that later. But I was seeking out these deep, intentional friendships where we'd read the Bible together, we would pray together, we would confess our struggles and our sins together. And all of a sudden I didn't feel very alone anymore. And fast forward to now, we are a year and like 6 months past that breakup, year and 7 months almost. And my community has definitely changed and evolved and grown. Still pretty much the same people. Um, but my idea of community has changed throughout that time, right? And so a few months ago, we went through this community practice, but before then, I had already been, you know, spending time in community and like deepening my friendships. And it was just such a game changer for me. So hopefully, maybe that'll add, like, if you, maybe that'll add to a desire to want community. If you're someone who's like, all I need is Jesus. Jesus had friends and he was God. So we definitely need friends. And the main reason for this is because our spiritual formation, it's easy to do on our own. For instance, it's easy to be patient when you're just alone. It's easy to be, kind and slow to speak when you're alone and don't have anyone around you, you know? It's easy when you're just seeing people here and there, having surface level conversations for you to think that you have everything a-okay, right? But it's when you start talking about different perspectives or differing opinions with your friends that you start to feel angry inside and you start to feel like resentful towards them, that you realize you actually have to work on forgiving this person from something they did years ago, right? And so when people say, like, I don't need friends, I have God, God can certainly convict you and he can certainly call out things and be like, "Hey, this isn't something that I want you to be doing." Um, but he has given us friends to kind of call that out. And maybe they don't necessarily call it out, but it's you feeling that resentment in your heart and then the Lord saying, "Hey, you need to forgive that person." You know what I mean? So that's like the biggest reason why we need friends because it is going to be the determining factor in our spiritual formation and determine how close we are going to be to Jesus, right? And so when I was younger, as an only child, I didn't have, siblings to play games with. So a lot of times I'd be playing with like my imaginary friends. And that was all cute and all when I was younger. But as I started to grow older, this loneliness just kind of grew inside of me. And kind of the reason why I didn't do anything about it for so long was because I had a fear. And so something that this podcasts or something that Practicing the Way talks about in their first video is that, they ask you, what are your primary feelings about living more deeply in community? Because for some people, they're extroverted, they want to spend, all the time in the world around people, but maybe they don't open up and they don't get deep because they don't actually want people to feel sorry for them or think they're struggling. Or maybe you're like me, where you've been hurt in the past. I used to have a friend in high school, and I always wanted like that one friend that we were just like did everything with. We were side by side, and there wasn't like a trio, it was just us two, a duo. And so I finally got that in high school. And I remember I was so happy because I was so scared going into freshman year. And then one day she kind of just left me. I don't even remember the full context, but all I remember is this feeling of loneliness I had when she started spending time with another girl. And I think ever since that time, I kind of I made this personal vow in my head that I would never let myself get close to someone because I had a fear that they would leave me. And with them, my deepest secrets, my deepest hurts, the things we talked about, that would go with them too. I know that's very common, of this fear of being hurt, whether it's through that or whether it's, a friend kind of ditching you for someone else. And so I think that's been my biggest fear, that I open up to someone, get really deep, they know the real me, and then they leave. That's still something that I actually wrestle with. This idea of like, if they know the real me, they're gonna leave. Because it definitely just like brings things inside of me from when I was younger, of kind of being different, like being the outcast, being the one who was like walking on the sidewalk with my friends and then had to tie her shoe. And so I would stop and tie my shoe and my friends would just keep walking, and like not even notice that I was there. Um, but I think there's this, not fear of like they're going to tell other people, because I already have aired my dirty laundry, if you will, online, because I've shared all my struggles and things with you guys, so Um, but I think it's this fear that they won't accept me and they won't want to spend time with me, or they think I'm weird. And so that's been my feelings about living more deeply in community. And it's definitely gotten better. Like I said, after the breakup, I made the push of, I'm going to seek out a mentor. I'm going to be part of a women's group. I'm going to be more open and honest and vulnerable with my friends. So I did that, but I never really got rid of this underlying belief. There's only so much that you can push through without identifying the root issue of, why are you not a part of community? And maybe you're saying to me, like, I'm not a part of community. I don't have friends because I just can't find them. If that's the case, pray and seek out a church. Seek out many churches if one isn't working for you. Like, keep looking, and I am sure you will find just one person that can introduce you to multiple. My friend, she was going to college, and this college scene wasn't really fitting her values, right? And something that was really cool was she felt God press it on her heart to start a Bible study. And so she started a Bible study. She was super excited about it. And one person came, one person. But then this one person invited her to another Bible study. And then at this Bible study, she was able to get part of a church. And so her Bible study that she started actually didn't end up working out, but she got a part of another Bible study where there was a lot of girls that she could, relate to. And even though her initial plan of like God telling her to create this Bible study and her thinking like, oh, I'm going to have a bunch of friends that I meet here, that didn't work out, God gave her something else. Um, and so if that's what you're saying of like, "Well, Adriana, I can't find community," just keep going, just keep trying different things out. Um, and maybe the reason why you're not finding community is because you have like a deep belief deep inside that's saying, "I'm scared." I feel like I've been good at like pushing myself. Like, I can push myself to be in community. I can push myself to be open to do that. But I still have this sense of, like, worry, I think. So that's something that I'm still working through. Even though I can push myself and do it, I'm still a little bit worried, are people gonna abandon me, you know? And I honestly think that's why we see like radical individualism today because it is so much easier. We have these phones where we can be connected online, but so disconnected from real human relationships. And radical individualism today actually helps us to keep from getting hurt. At least we think it does, because all it does in the long run is make us feel more lonely and more just like no one wants to be around us, right? And I'm not saying that you're not going to get hurt in community. I have had falling outs with my friends. I have had fights with Christopher, right? Arguments. And what's really cool is like your husband or your spouse. The closest person in my life is Christopher, my husband, right? He's also the one that I probably argue the most with. And so there is like this give and take of like, I am going to be a part of this person's life and we're going to share, our deepest feelings and support each other and be the community for each other. But it's also going to come with some arguments and some hurt. And so you have to be okay with that. I know if you're someone like me who kind of just wants to avoid conflict, you're going to get very surface level friendships. When I started having more conflict with my closest friends or just having like occasional arguments, that's when we actually started getting deeper and closer because eventually because we stopped talking about these surface level things and we talked about how we really feel. And then maybe the other person says, "Well, actually, I don't feel that way about this particular thing. I feel this way or this is my opinion." And then you start having this conversation which yes, it can get heated, but we'll get into that later of like how to deal with community when things and conflict may come up. But anyway, with all of that being said, my main point of this whole but my main question that I think you should ask, which is actually in the whole like workbook of practicing the way, um, is that you should ask, what are your primary feelings about living deeply in community? And are those feelings aiding to your ability to find community? Or is it not helping? Like, what is your mindset towards community? It says in this video as well that we have different like circles of friendships in our lives. So we have brothers and sisters, or, the intimates, which is 1 to 5 close relationships who we deeply know and love us. So for me, that's Christopher, two of my super close friends, probably 3 people, I would say. Then you have your kin. That's about 15 family or friends who support you and share life with you. And so for me, that would be like our Practicing the Way group. We meet every Thursday and we go through a practice like community. And we've been doing that for like the past year. And so for me, that's probably them. And then your village. Your village is up to 150 broader social connections that provide support and resources. So maybe that's like your job or an organization, or your church. And then a tribe is the larger group that we identify with. This could be like not just your church, but like all the churches, like Christians in general. And so it goes more into this in the Practicing the Way video. But my point in saying this is we need all of these different circles, apparently. And this was funny, but this is more of like a scientific resource. But Andrew Huberman did a podcast a while back on like human connection. And he talked about how when he was working in a lab, he would see the janitor every day and he would have small talk with the janitor, say like how's your day going? And he would be at the lab, day and night just working. And he said that the amount of like joy and kind of just like sense of not being lonely that this janitor provided him was just very cool to see. And obviously he said it in more scientific terms. I don't really know. But he was talking about how like there are some studies that show that just the people that you see on a daily basis, the people that you randomly say hi to, those really help like our level of happiness, right? And so when I think about when I go to the grocery store and I see someone that I know, sometimes I can get a little bit like, "Oh, I don't wanna, like, talk to anyone right now. I'm trying to, like, run out of here." But lately, I've been opening and welcoming every opportunity, and I've been feeling so much better anytime I run into an acquaintance or, someone I don't really know very well. I see them, and instead of freaking out, I'm like, let me welcome this conversation. And I feel so happy after and just like so excited. And I had an opportunity actually a few weeks ago where someone prayed for me, that I knew, but not super well. And I just ran into this person at the grocery store, and it was a kind of cool experience. And honestly, I feel like that prayer really helps looking back because it was talking about I was talking about how I just need prayer for like adjusting in marriage, and how like this change was kind of hard for me of like living in a different place and having a different routine. And honestly, I didn't even think about that till now, but my routine, I couldn't be happier with it. The change I don't feel is a burden anymore. Like I'm so happy with this change. So prayer answered. I just realized that now. That's something to definitely journal about. But anyway, my point in saying this is you need all of these different circles of community, you know? And I actually took a screenshot of it on here to talk about, because the Practicing the Way video, they talk about how Jesus had Peter, James, John, his brothers, and his sisters. Those were his like intimate 1 to 5. And then he had the 12, which was the disciples. And then he had Mary and Martha, and those were his kin. So about 15. And then the 120, which was in Jerusalem, like their village. And then his followers, that was like the tribe, the larger group that you identify with. And those were people who were Christians or who followed him, Christ followers. And so it's cool to see how like Jesus lived this out, and he was God, and he had all these different categories. And so we should as well, right? If we're to be like Jesus, we should kind of have a similar community. And so it's cool to see in the Bible where Jesus is having meals with his community, with his kin, with his close 1 to 5 people frequently. And this is something that our church today, I'm talking about like the church of, Western civilization, it's still very individualized, or not still, it is very individualized. It wasn't in the past. In the past, church or community in, the book of Acts looked like everyone sharing everything they had and eating together and just living life together. And now Christians go to church on Sunday and then leave, maybe not even talking to a single person. And this was me for so long. When I first started getting into my journey with God, I would go to church and I would check it off a list and I would leave still feeling lonely and empty and maybe being inspired for like a day, but then going back to the same habits. And it's because I didn't have anyone to keep me accountable. I didn't have anyone that was like speaking into my life. And so I felt very lonely. And that's what a large percentage of our population calls Christianity. When I'm not saying they're bad people for this, I'm not judging them. I'm just saying it's sad that we have chalked church up to being a place that you just go for an hour, listen to someone preach, and then you leave. When in the Bible, in the book of Acts, when Jesus makes Peter like the rock of the church, the foundation of the church, they are having meals together and talking about scripture and having this like communal living, right? They're not so individualized. And I don't want to like beat a dead horse, but radical individualism is really ruining our culture, and it's making us lonely, right? With all this being said, I hope you can take away that we need community in our lives. Even if you are married, even if you're in a relationship, especially if you're single, not even especially, just in all these scenarios, you need friends. Your spouse is a part of your community, but shouldn't be the only one in your community. You can't have all your eggs in one basket. And I don't mean that by, oh, he's going to leave you and then you're going to have no one. Not saying that. I'm just saying that there are things that I will talk about with my friends that I may not talk about with my husband. And not saying that I'm keeping secrets from him, but just saying that there are some things that only girls will understand. And so I'm just going to talk to them. There are some things that I want to talk to an older woman about, a mentor, and ask her questions about, well, what did you do in your marriage? And in order to have that ability to ask these questions and have people supporting you through life, you need to start off by having just a few friends, even one that may lead you to more. And this is something that I said earlier. My friend who was at college had one friend come to her Bible study, and this one friend introduced her to all of these other people, and this other Bible study that just helped her make friends. So, just a reminder, if you do want to actually follow this practice and like go through it and learn more, because this is just kind of my takeaways, go to the link that I'll put down below in the description and make a free account. Even better, do the community practice with your community. That would be great. But with all of that being said, I hope you enjoyed this episode. And if you did, make sure to like, hit the subscribe button, or follow if you are listening on like a podcast streaming app. And I hope that we can continue to create a life we love together. And I know we can't really do it together because, I may not know you personally. And so when I say together, I think I'm just meaning like the grander kind of body, like a tribe, a tribe that wants to get spiritually healthy. Yeah. So let's continue to grow together. Stay tuned for next week. We'll talk more about community. Bye.